You think you want the traffic to move faster. You think you want your coworker to finally get it right. You think you want the Wi-Fi to stop lagging during the one call that matters. But that's not what you actually want. I mean that literally, not as a metaphor. There's a trap hiding under all of this, and it has a name: justified frustration. It's the quiet belief that your irritation is earned, not chosen, and you've been building the case for it for years, one reasonable outburst at a time. Here's the lie, dressed up 3 different ways. If people just did their job right, you'd be calm. If traffic wasn't so bad, you'd be patient. If you just had more control, you'd finally feel at peace. But chasing control over the world outside you costs you the one thing you actually had control over: your own nervous system. In the next 12 minutes, you'll see why this pattern never fixes itself, no matter how many things around you change. And you'll see the one shift that finally ends it. I'm not here to tell you to calm down. I'm here to show you why you never could. Do you replay arguments hours later, rewriting what you should have said? Do small delays feel like a personal insult? Does "just let it go" feel physically impossible, like trying to unclench a fist that won't open? If you nodded to any of that, listen closely. You're not broken. You're patterned, and patterns have a starting point. Real quick before we start, if you enjoy content like this, go ahead and drop a like and subscribe. It takes 2 seconds, but it means a lot for the channel. Let's jump in. Go back for a moment. Maybe you're at the dinner table, and the room feels calm only when everyone is careful. Calm wasn't just there for the taking. It had to be earned, tiptoed toward, managed. Maybe the only time things changed, the only time you got what you needed, was when someone raised their voice. That's where the pattern got built. Psychologists would call it frustration as control. The moment you learned that anger was the one lever that actually moved things. Not asking nicely, not waiting patiently. Anger. It worked, so your brain filed it away as the tool that gets results. Does that sound familiar? Maybe not the exact scene, but the feeling underneath it, that peace was conditional, and irritation was the price of admission to being heard. Here's what that cost you. Years of walking around with your shoulders near your ears. Relationships that learned to orbit your moods. Checking the weather in you before anyone spoke freely. That's not connection, that's management. And here's the deeper truth hiding under all of it. It was never really about the traffic, or the coworker, or the Wi-Fi. Those were just the latest trigger. What you were actually chasing, every single time, was a felt sense of power in a moment that once made you feel like you had none. You didn't inherit a temper. You inherited a survival strategy, and survival strategies can be replaced. Fast forward to adulthood, and the same pattern doesn't stay small. It grows teeth. Maybe it showed up at work, in a meeting where you finally said everything you'd been holding back, voice sharp, words landing like a slammed door. Or maybe it showed up at home, in a fight with someone you loved, where you said the one thing you knew would hurt the most. Just to feel like you'd won something, you took the action that felt like the fix. You quit the job on the spot. You cut the friend off completely. You said the sentence that ended the argument in your favor, the one that made the other person go quiet. In that moment, it felt like relief. It felt like proof that you were finally in control. But watch what happened next, because this is the part most people skip past. The blow-up got you the outcome. The job was gone. The friend was gone. The argument was won. And within days, sometimes hours, that same tight, restless feeling crawled back into your chest. Nothing on the outside had actually changed for you on the inside. That's the tell. That's the data point that matters more than any of the others. If the fix worked, the tension would have stayed gone. It didn't. It never does. Because winning the moment doesn't win the war inside you. You can clear every obstacle in your path and still wake up the next morning, carrying the exact same weight you started with, just wearing a different outfit. Now, This is usually the point where people ask me the same question. If winning the moment doesn't fix the war inside, what actually does? That's a bigger conversation than one video can hold, and it's exactly what I walk through, step by step, inside my free newsletter, where I break down the science of nervous system regulation in plain, practical language you can use the same day you read it. If you want the tools behind everything I'm about to show you, that's where to find them. The link is right below this video. Back to the pattern, because it gets more interesting. A few years ago, I sat in an airport during a bad storm delay. Every flight on the board had turned into a question mark. Two men sat near me, both stuck in the exact same mess, both missing the exact same connection. One of them stood up every few minutes, sighed loud enough for the whole gate to hear, and paced in tight little circles like a dog on a short leash. He snapped at a gate agent who had no more control over the weather than he did. His whole body looked like a fist. The other man sat still. He pulled out a book, glanced at the board once in a while, and when a stranger asked him if he was worried about missing his connection, he just shrugged and said, "It'll land when it lands. Nothing I do here changes that." He wasn't faking calm. He genuinely looked like a man with nowhere else he needed to be. Same storm, same delay, same broken plans, completely different internal weather. That's the part worth sitting with. It wasn't the airport that made one man spiral and left the other man steady. The circumstance was identical for both of them, down to the minute. The only thing that was different was what was happening inside each of them before the delay ever started. This is the core truth hiding in plain sight. Circumstance was never the variable that decided how they felt. Regulation was. One man's nervous system had a way of meeting stress without being hijacked by it. The other man's nervous system reacted to a delayed flight like it was a threat to his survival. The storm didn't create the difference, it only revealed it. So let's get specific about the destination, because just be calmer is not a real instruction. It's a wish. Here's what calm actually looks like when you break it down. Calm feels like space, a gap between the thing that happens and the thing you do next. Back in your old pattern, that gap was zero. The trigger hit and the reaction fired in the same breath, like a nerve, not a choice. Calm puts a hallway between those two moments, even a short one, long enough to pick your next move instead of being dragged into it. Calm feels like decisions made from clarity instead of heat. In the old pattern, you decided things mid-blow-up, and you know how that usually turns out. Words you can't take back. Choices made by the angriest version of you, then inherited by the rest of you the next morning. Calm lets the steadier version of you make the call instead. And calm feels like relationships that don't brace for you. People stop reading your face when they walk in the door. They stop rehearsing how to bring you bad news. The room exhales instead of holding its breath. Here is the part you need to hear plainly because it's the whole point of this video. None of this shows up because the traffic clears, or the coworker improves, or the Wi-Fi finally holds steady. Calm is not a gift the outside world hands you when it finally behaves. It has to be built inside you, on purpose, regardless of what is happening around you. No circumstance was ever going to hand this to you. You were always going to have to generate it yourself. Now here's where most people quietly panic, even if they don't say it out loud. If I let go of the anger, doesn't that mean I stop caring? Doesn't that mean people stop taking me seriously? Doesn't that mean I go back to being the person nobody listened to before I learned to raise my voice? That fear feels real, but let's actually test it, because fear is not the same thing as truth. Ask yourself this pivotal question: what if the anger was never protecting you at all? What if, instead, it was protecting a story? The story that you are powerless unless you're loud? Sit with that for a second, because here's the blunt answer. It was never protection. It was a leash. It kept you tied to the belief that calm equals invisible, and invisible equals unsafe. So you flared up, again and again, not because it made you strong, but because it was the only proof you had that you still mattered in the room. The real thing it was guarding was your right to feel like your reactions mean something, like you're not just background noise in your own life. Here's the picture I want you to keep. Frustration is a smoke alarm. A smoke alarm is supposed to go off once, tell you there's a fire, and let you handle it. But imagine an alarm that's been shrieking for 20 years straight, so long that the sound itself starts to feel like safety. You don't even notice the noise anymore. You just assume that as long as it's blaring, you're fine. But a smoke alarm that never stops isn't protecting you. It's just noise you've mistaken for security. And it's time to finally put out the fire underneath it, instead of learning to live with the siren. I'll tell you where I learned all of this, because it wasn't in a textbook first. It was in a moment I almost quit making these videos for good. I'd put in months of work, and the numbers weren't moving, and the comments were harsh, and I remember sitting at my desk convinced that if the algorithm just treated me fairly, if people just understood what I was trying to do, I'd finally feel okay again. I was outsourcing my calm to an audience I couldn't control. The day I stopped waiting for the outside world to cooperate and started building steadiness from the inside instead, everything about this work changed. Not because the circumstances got easier, because I did, and that's the whole thesis of this video, so let it land. Frustration isn't a response to the world. It's a request for control you are never going to get from the outside. Not from traffic, not from a coworker, not from Wi-Fi or an algorithm, or anyone else's behavior. So here's your instruction, plain and direct. Stop negotiating with your circumstances. Start regulating your state. That's the whole shift. Not smaller problems, a steadier you standing in front of them. Remember the alarm from earlier, the one that's been going off for years. The goal was never to rip out the wires and pretend nothing's wrong. The goal is to turn off the alarm by finally putting out the fire underneath it. Before you go, I want to hear from you. Tell me in the comments about the moment you realized your anger was never really about the thing sitting right in front of you. I read every one of them, and I promise you're not the only person who's about to recognize themselves in this video. And remember to like and subscribe. Thank you for spending this time with me. I'll see you in the next one.